Hello, and welcome back to another episode recap where I'll lay out 5 things that I learned from my conversation with a historical expert. And today, we'll chat about the 2012 movie Lawless. That's the movie about the bootlegging brothers starring Tom Hardy, Shia LaBeouf, and Guy Pearce. If you're a regular listener to the audio version of the Based on a True Story podcast, you'll know that I had author Jack Bondurant on the show to talk about the historical accuracy of the movie. After all, the film was based on Matt's book about his own grandfather, Jack Bondurant, and Jack's 2 brothers. Well, that episode was almost an hour long, so if you don't have the time to listen to the whole thing yet, well, that's the purpose of this quick video recap of the 5 things I learned about the movie Lawless from my discussion with Matt. So let's get started. Number 1. It's not intended to be entirely true. Something Matt made clear to me in our discussion was that his book was not intended to be a history book. Even though it's based on some real people in his family's history, and there are real events, there's also a lot about the story we just don't know. After all, his grandfather and granduncles that the story is based on were bootleggers who were doing some very illegal things back in the 1930s during Prohibition. So, documenting their deeds wasn't exactly something that they did. So, Matt explained that he filled in some of the historical holes and compressed some things down to tell the story. As a result, it's not really intended to be a historical biography or anything like that. Matt's book that the movie is based on is a novel, a fictionalized version of a historical story. Number 2, Franklin County and Chicago were not connected like in the movie. One of the things we see in the movie is a connection between Franklin County, Virginia, where the Bondurants are located, and the big city of Chicago. As Matt explained to me, the movie's director, John Hillcoat, wanted to contrast the Appalachian bootleggers with the big city gangsters in Chicago. In the movie, Guy Pearce's character, Charlie Rakes, is from Chicago, and that's how we get the connection from Franklin County to Chicago. And that really wasn't the case. That doesn't mean Charlie Rakes was a fictional character. As Matt explained, Charlie Rakes was real, but he was from Franklin County. Charlie was the local sheriff, so being a small area, he and the Bondurants knew each other pretty well. In some ways, that makes the true story a lot more personal because that scene in the movie where Charlie wanted to kill the Bondurant brothers on the bridge, that really happened. Number 3, Forrest and Maggie's romance was real. Even though there were some things that were made up for the movie, there was also a lot of things that were real. A big example of this was the romance we see on screen between Tom Hardy's version of Forrest Bondurant and Jessica Chastain's character, Maggie. That was real. In fact, Matt explained that the real Forrest and Maggie even got married in secret at some point. Of course, we don't really know a lot of the specifics around that. See point number 1, where I was talking about bootleggers during Prohibition, not really wanting to document everything. Number 4, Forrest really did get his throat cut. In the movie, there's a scene where Tom Hardy's version of Forrest Bondurant has his throat cut. If you've seen the film, you know the scene I'm talking about. As surprising as it may seem, it really did happen. With that said, though, Matt explained that even though we know it happened, no one knows who did it. Most people at the time thought it was a rival gang who did it, but no one was ever arrested for it. After getting his throat cut in the movie, we see Forrest start walking to the hospital with blood pouring out of his throat, and in the snow, no less. As Matt explained, this was an example of how he filled in some of the historical holes in the story. For example, he told me that Forrest did get his throat cut, and according to the only documentation at the time, the newspapers, when Forrest showed up at the hospital, they asked how he got there. His reply was simply that he walked there. But the distance from where his throat got cut to the hospital was some 10 miles. So, is it realistic for someone who gets their throat cut to walk 10 miles to a hospital? Maybe not so much. So it was Matt's idea that maybe it was Maggie who actually saved Forrest's life and Forrest just didn't realize it. Number 5. The shootout with Charlie Rakes was amplified for the movie. Okay, there really was a shootout between Charlie Rakes and the Bondurant brothers like we see in the movie. It's just that they upped the stakes a little bit in the film. For one, Charlie Rakes didn't really die in the shootout like we see in the movie. In the shootout, there were only a few shots fired. Charlie shot Jack and Forrest, but before he shot Howard, one of his deputies knocked his hand down. So 2 of the 3 brothers were shot, but Forrest was not shot multiple times like we see in the movie. So Charlie Rakes didn't die at the shootout like we see in the movie either, but he did die under suspicious circumstances. Matt explained that Charlie developed pneumonia and died within 1 day. So, a little odd. And this was another example of how Matt used that fact to theorize that perhaps the Bondurant brothers had something to do with Charlie's death. But of course, we'll never really know for sure. That's all for today, and hopefully you've enjoyed this episode recap of 5 things that I learned from Matt Bondurant about the movie Lawless. Now, Matt and I talked for a lot longer than really just talking about these few things that I've talked about in this video. So if you want to hear the full interview with Matt, go check out the audio podcast episode at basedonatruestorypodcast.com/68. Once again, that's basedonatruestorypodcast.com/68. And don't forget, if you want a deep dive into the story behind the movie Lawless, go pick up a copy of Matt's book called The Wettest County in the World. That's a nickname for Franklin County. In the meantime, for more recaps and full-length episodes of Based on a True Story, hit that subscribe button right now. Thanks for watching.